Gary is kind of like Elon Musk.
This is not in the script. You don't do this. You don't do this at age 37. This is where you're making your big next executive move.
He who shouts the loudest gets the attention.
Often in our roles as CEOs, we have this vision, we have this mission. The best version of your life is on the other side of your fears. I mean, don't beat yourself up about it. Sabotage yourself. So
yes.
I'm just managing my way to the end. That sense of accomplishment is very strong in that. I mean, there's only so much coffee you can drink.
CEOs that think that they know everything don't.
We cannot make multi-billion rand investments. The biggest problem in this country is the threat of deindustrialization, job losses, economic stagnation.
Welcome to the Autobiography, a video series that shines a spotlight on inspiring leaders, that captures their fascinating stories, their personal journeys, and the secrets to their success. Today, I'm privileged to be joined by Gary Scott, CEO of Kia South Africa and Vice President of NAAMSA, the Automotive Business Council. Gary, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here. The most gracious, humble CEO in the country of automotive, I think, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Autobiography. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Well, gracious and humble till about 5 seconds ago. I think the head's swelling. Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here.
Good. So, getting right into it, tell us a little bit about your hobbies. What do you like doing on your off time? And, believe it or not, CEOs have off time. You have to. So what do you do in that time?
Look, I think if you don't have off time, you're going to have permanent off time. So for me, the constant is running. So it's one of those sports where someone who's not a runner looks at it and says, they always look like they're in pain. There's always a grimace. Where's the pleasure in that? But I think when you're on the inside, you realize that it's a really great place to get in a different headspace. Everyone will tell you that sweating, getting the body in motion is great for our sense of well-being. And of course in South Africa we've got incredible weather, we've got landscape, we've got that kind of thing. And what I find, people who go to gym, I go to gym as well, but whatever sport you're playing, it's an equalizer. And you have to step out of your role where you're the boss and you're the kingpin or whatever. And now you're just an equal. We're all going to run the same distance, we're all going to put an effort in, and we all get satisfied with a conclusion. And I think what's great about running as a sport is there's a beginning and an end. Often in our roles as CEOs, we have this vision, we have this mission, we are striving towards something that almost never gets there.
It's like the goalposts keep moving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas this is, it starts and it ends, you close it off, you pack it away and you move on. So that sense of accomplishment is very strong in that sport.
Do you do marathons or just running for pleasure?
Yeah, so my running club would say that I don't do nearly enough marathons, but I've got a comrades under the belt, which was last year, which was a bit of a walk. I've got two Oceans Ultras.
You obviously finished in the, 11 hours, I think?
Oh, it's 12.
Is it 12?
So
okay.
Yeah, I was just over 11. It was a long walk at the end. Very scenic. I spoke to the crowds. It was quite a friendly thing.
What happens when you get to that stage of needing to walk? Is it your heart just can't do it anymore? Is it your legs?
Well, I think for me in that case, it was the unknown. So, if you've never run 90 Ks, you don't know how you're going to react. And what I didn't want to happen is cramp sets in and I sit down on the pavement and my day is done. Once you've sort of got 60, 70 behind you, you're going to finish unless you sabotage yourself. So
yes.
I'm just managing my way to the end. I want to tick the box and get this in the bag, and I can sort of savor the moment. And it's not about a medal. The other races are about the medal and the time
yes.
and beating your mates and beating yourself and doing all of that. That one for me is just...
And if out of interest, what is your heart rate generally on most of the time during that race? Or run? Yeah,
probably. I mean, ideally it should be around 135 to 145. I'm probably more like 155 to 160.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm proud of that because that shows you that you're working, you're pushing, you're doing
yes.
what you need to do.
Yeah, your cardio fitness is probably high.
Yeah. So I mean, the rest heart rate will be in the 50s.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been trying to get my resting heart rate down
yes.
because as you age, your heart rate increases, blood pressure increases
yes.
subtly. So I've been trying to use exercise to get my resting heart rate down. And it's working. I mean, I seem to be in the late 60s, 68, 69, maybe 71 sitting here. Actually, I don't know what it's on right now. Probably because we're doing this interview, it's on 79.
You're so excited.
Exactly. But generally, what is the reason you run? Is it those health benefits, or just because you enjoy it? I mean, I don't know who would enjoy doing 90 Ks, but
it's something you can completely compartmentalize. So on the one hand, you're able to even think about work while you're running, because I do trail running as well, which is very technical. You're watching the next step, don't trip on that stone, watch for that, don't fall over the cliff, that kind of thing. But road running is more like a metronome.
Okay.
And it really is a form of meditation. So for me, it's stress management, and it's always that health check. If you exercise and sweat, your capacity and your baseline energy is that much higher.
I like that baseline energy.
Yeah, and we need it. I mean, there's only so much coffee you can drink, there's only so much you can do there. But if you exercise every day, and I do it in the mornings, I always run in the mornings, you bring your best version of yourself to the office. And that's a responsibility we have, is to do that for our people.
As people leaders, exactly. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up. Where were you born?
So I'm proudly Joburg South. Grew up in the south.
So Glen Vista, Glenanda, Besonia.
I was in Glenanda till I was 6. I went to Glenanda Primary. I was the head boy of Glenanda Primary, 1987. Yeah, I'm showing my age now. And then we moved to Glen Vista when I was 6, closer to the golf club for my dad. I think that was a vested interest there. My mom was from Rosettenville, my dad from Turfentine, so we are generational South.
Oh wow! I mean, that's real South, Turfentine and Rosettenville.
Yeah. No, it was a wonderful.
Because that was the original South, right?
The original South. So if you think of the old Joburg, the mine workers lived in Turfentine and Rosettenville, and the mine bosses were in sort of the park towns and those areas, the leafier suburbs of Johannesburg. And then, ironically, high school I went to Parktown Boys.
Oh, really?
Which was a great school. Still is a great school. So celebrating 100 years this year.
Wow.
So yeah.
And growing up your entire teenage years in the south of Joburg, or did you end up moving?
Living. But I think it was one of those strange things where your primary school mates were at different schools. They were at Mondial or Glen Vista, and you kind of drifted apart. So the teenage years were really, most of my friends were living in the northern suburbs or in Randburg, those kinds of areas. Although my brother from another mother is from Robertsham, and still one of my 2 best mates. So, yeah.
So my dad, incidentally, wanted me to go to Mentorship.
Okay.
And at the time, I was totally against it because it was partly a technical school.
Yes.
And I didn't want to do that.
Yes.
So I never ended up going to Mentorship, but I believe it was, some of those schools in the south are really good schools.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I can't speak for the high school. The high school produced my brother, and so we can talk offline about whether that was a good thing. I'm just kidding. I mean, he's a great guy.
So when we're in our teens, not so much I suppose under the age of 13, but especially when you say 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, you have dreams about, everybody says to you, what do you want to become, Gary?
Yes.
And then some people are forced to give an answer. Other people dream about what they want to become.
Yes.
Which one were you, and what did you dream about if you did?
I think it changed so much, but I mean the early years was a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor.
Medical doctor,
and I think that was about. It looked glamorous, but it also was about helping people. It looked like a noble profession. I mean, it still does. But I think what killed the doctor dream was in Standard 9 or maybe Matric. I wrote a semester test and got 24% for biology, and realised there's too much swatting in this line. So that dream died. Pilot was the other one.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I did the whole thing of. Friend of my father put me on a Beechcraft Bonanza and said, let's circle around the skies, let me show you some of the controls, play with Microsoft Flight Simulator, all of those kinds of things. But I think what put me off ultimately was the routineness. So it's a highly skilled profession, you get to see the world, but what worried me was the routineness. The
routineness in the cockpit, because it's very checklist driven job.
Very much.
Or the routineness of going to a destination,
checking into a hotel, checking out of the hotel,
Okay.
all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But a lot of your career right now, and I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but a lot of your career right now probably is also in that routineness in terms of working for an international OEM.
Yes.
You know, going overseas, checking into a hotel, spending time there, coming back.
You'd be surprised because Kia operates, and not everyone knows this, Kia operates as an independent distributor in South Africa. So we are not that beholden to the OEM. Of course, we have to check in. There are sales targets, MOUs, business plans, that kind of thing. We report into Dubai. And in an ordinary year, I'd probably be up there 4 to 6 times a year. Okay. And there's a weekly or bi-weekly check-in. But there's a fair bit of autonomy.
Oh, lovely.
We're part of the Motors Group in South Africa. And so as part of that exco, of course, there are meetings, there are schedules. But a lot of the job, and I think this is one of the daunting things about being a CEO, as you know, certainly initially, is you've got to fill your own diary.
Yes.
You've got to say, how do I spend my time most productively for most impact in sort of executing on this vision?
Okay, so I suppose being a pilot is kind of more of that routine, whereas now you're doing it maybe 4 times a year. So going back to your teenage self, and you've now got a lot of experience. If you had a time machine and you could go back to your teenage self, what advice would you give yourself?
So I think the one thing, and I have lived this since then, is you regret much more the things you didn't do than the things you did do. So you do something and it was badly judged and you made a mistake and it was embarrassing or whatever. That's fine. That kind of pain fades. It's the thing you didn't do, the girl you didn't express your feelings to, the gap you didn't take, those kinds of things. 30 years later you can regret those things. So there was a little bit of that, I suppose, in my teenage years where I was probably a bit too cautious with certain things. You didn't try out for the first team tennis, for example. You coast.
You doubted yourself.
And then you look back and you say, actually it was up for grabs, and the people who grabbed it succeeded. And
that's the good advice because quite often, I think we live our lives thinking we've done everything.
Yes.
In the meantime, there's some things that you've missed, for your own lack of risk-taking, as you put it, or don't want to be bold enough, or whatever reason.
What do they say? Like the best version of your life is on the other side of your fears. I mean, it's basically true.
Yes, standing on the edge of that cliff,
exactly,
and then not jumping. So during this career that you've navigated to this point, you might have had heroes and mentors. And I was speaking to a young 18-year-old, day before yesterday, I was in Cape Town, who had a startup. And he had a couple of staff members and had investors, and he was 18. And I looked at this and I thought to myself, sure, I'm almost 50. And this guy's doing it properly at 18. Yeah. And he started talking to me, asking me, well, how have I navigated this? How does he get a board that he can trust? And, how does he start to build that? And I said to him, maybe it's less about a board and more about a mentor. Not necessarily a single mentor, but maybe you'll have a couple of them over your lifetime, somebody that's invested in your success. How do you see that? And have you had them over your career?
It's absolutely critical. So sometimes it's mentorship and sometimes it's partnership. So because I've been in corporate my whole life, there hasn't really been a lot of entrepreneurship on the side, but there certainly has been some property investment. And I've found that doing that in partnership is much better, but if you do it with the wrong partners, it can be absolutely catastrophic. If you do it with the right partners, it's a completely different result, confidence, growth, trajectory, the whole thing. And learning over your life who to trust, but also who you can work in Sabbatical with, who kind of just works, what combinations gel. You can have the best team on paper, and then you just don't gel.
Yes.
I think that's a life lesson, is learning to suss that out. From a mentorship perspective, I joined Kia in 2002. The product range was not the greatest. It had lots of potential for improvement, let's put it that way. And I'd always enjoyed cars. I am a petrol head. This wasn't one of the brands I was fanatical about. And I didn't really know the Imperial Group, maybe from a distance, listed group. But I met Ray Levine, who was the CEO and founder, and obviously Manny DeCania on the other side. But I only met Manny after I joined. When I met Ray, it was I don't care what this guy is selling. I want to work with him or for him. And Ray always was that mentor for me. And I think, you know, part of what a mentor does is they show you your strengths, and they create an environment where you play to your strengths. And
they invest in your success.
And completely, there's no ulterior motive. It's not transactional. It's not how do I extract something out of you. It's how do I help you bring your best self to the game. And Ray was naturally that kind of a leader. So that mentorship continues. I mean, we don't speak a lot.
Yes.
He's happily retired, but when we do, I'm always energized after that chat.
Talking about your journey to Kia, but coming out of the teenage years, what did your career look like, and what did Gary look like between, you know, leaving school and then joining Kia? You mentioned you joined Kia in
2002.
Yeah. So what was that period between 2002 and leaving school?
So definitely, you know, some kids have such a scripted life from the time they leave school. You know, if you've gone that doctor route, you know, your next 7 years is kind of, maybe your next 10 years is kind of carved out for you. I landed where I landed very much by accident. So in matric, where are we going with this? What are your interests? What are your aptitudes? And kind of it was like you could do everything except probably painting. That's a little bit too artistic, but I mean, I loved writing, so I was good at English, I was good at maths, computers, and was interested in business, and of course liked cars, but that was so far in the distance, didn't see a job there. Fell into a BCom, like so many people do, fell into BCom with 700 other kids at RAU, which is now UJ, and studying in Afrikaans. And the link there was my other best friend. His dad was a professor and sort of sold the university. But you end up then learning your second language a bit better because you have to.
Did you have to write exams in Afrikaans too?
We wrote in Afrikaans.
Wow.
But I mean, remember, it's also a lot of numeracy subjects, so there's not a lot of writing, and I'm sure the grammar wasn't fantastic, just enough for the lecturer to understand what you're writing. But you get exposed to another culture as an English-speaking person in an Afrikaans community. That was very, very interesting for me. And then kind of fell out of that. So, okay, I'm now halfway through this degree, what next? Well, you might as well keep going. And then did the CA thing. And did a very scenic route. So, I mean, I would say to anybody who sets out to do a 4-year degree and let's do, whether it's law or engineering or accounts, if your route ends up taking you 8 years or 9 years instead of 6 or 7 years, don't beat yourself up about it. You will have other life experiences that the other people on the more conventional track didn't. I had a 4-year degree, and I had a 2-year honours. So I did 4 years over 6 years, but I got to travel to Europe for a month.
Oh wow!
I got to work while I studied. I met my wife through that situation. I grew up in some ways, in ways that my friends didn't, and yet I was still a student and enjoying the campus life and doing all of that. And by the time you're our age, 48, 2 years of scenic route means absolutely nothing. But it meant the world to me in terms of life experience. So
that's one of those things that you probably, if you didn't do, you would have gone back and told yourself to do.
Exactly right. Or you'd hanker for it for the rest of time, and nobody wants those regrets. So then fell from that into Deloitte Woodmead, Deloitte Johannesburg. Unbelievable professional learning environment, made lifetime friends, lots of youthful energy. You're all professional, ambitious, young. There's an energy that comes out of that. You're learning new businesses because you're at a different client every week. And stayed a year and a half after that. But I think realized that auditing wasn't a passion. And for many people it is, and for some friends it continues to be. So I'm not going to disparage that. But I think the grounding was unbelievable. And what happened at the end of that, they've got a secondment thing where you can go for 3 months overseas. I went in 2001, before 9/11, I went to New York.
Oh, wow.
And I spent my time between New York and Washington, D.C. So I had 3 months of work experience in a different culture, in the financial capital of the world. Unbelievable life experience, and then traveled for a couple of weeks afterwards around the States.
Wow.
So my worldview was expanding, and the understanding that your path creates so many possibilities for you. I could have stayed. I was offered a job to stay. I could have been an American. as a consultant in the Deloitte. 6 months later, after 9/11, they had to retrench a whole lot of people, and I wasn't there to be retrenched. So life is a funny way of playing towards a fate. And when I came back, even though during my articles I'd done some motor, and I'm talking dealership, motor retail clients, I never thought, oh, here's where I'd like to work one day. I liked the fact that they sold cars and I could sample the product and as a petrol head, but that never came to bear. Again, almost like the Ray Levine thing, people are so important to me. I followed a colleague who I'd respected who said, I've joined this group, come for an interview. And I thought, I need to move on to the next chapter. And then the Kia opportunity sort of came about.
And that was in about 2002?
That was 2002, and that was a financial manager position. So obviously your life experience at this stage is, I'm a CA and I've got articles and a little bit beyond articles.
Yes.
You're going to move into operations typically as in a finance role, and that's what happened.
I mean, I can't believe how similar our paths are. I just found that doing articles was like the army. I didn't go to the army, but I think I did my army stint in doing articles because it's something you at times love, but at times loathe.
Yeah.
Earning almost nothing.
That's true.
Being somebody skivvy. But then when you come out of it, you look back and you think to yourself, oh, geez, I got so much experience there. I made so many friends there, and really that's where you learned to be structured, methodical, think about things, problem solve properly, forget all the accountancy. I got so much else out of it.
And it's also very humbling because you taught through this marketing machine that the CA is almost godlike, right?
Yes.
Now you arrive in articles and you're dealing with the creditors clerk who's going to tell you how you do that job. It doesn't matter what you think you've got. They're going to show you how life works on the ground.
Exactly.
And right through the organizations that you're auditing, you're going to get humbled about the real world. I think that was part of that schooling for sure.
So now you get invited for an interview at Kia.
Yeah.
You're in the finance field at Kia. How did your career progress from there? How did you see it? Did you see it as a forever job as finance manager, or did you start to have this ambition?
You're almost spot on. So I probably had an initial vision of audit partner, right? I'm staying on post articles. Why would I do that unless I want to be a partner? And then it was, okay, well, if I'm going to leave, then wherever I go, financial director, that's my end game. And within 18 months, I was financial director of Kia. And then suddenly you say, well, I'm 27. Do I have a new end game, or is it this repeated 35 times over?
Yes.
And you do shift, I think, quite quickly. And I think what I learned in this business that I'm in motors, what was AMH Imperial then, is that you can create your own opportunity. It's a fantastic organization to work for in that sense. And there's a real culture of taking finance people and guiding them into operations. Even in your finance role, you're very operational.
Yes.
And so you get a taste of it and you get to love it. And you can see that you can add value. And then to move sideways and sort of color in your level of experience operationally is quite easy. It's not a daunting step. It's quite a well-supported step.
So how did the finance side of your life benefit post-finance, so into your CEO role? How do you find that benefits you?
It benefits me today still. So I mean, you would have spoken to other CEOs who perhaps came out of sales and marketing or came out of engineering background, and those skills, even just the way of thinking, it's training about how to think, isn't it? More. So if you asked me to recite, what did we call them, AC statements or
I remember
the current
those.
IFRS statements, I'd probably be a horrible CA in that respect. I was never about the rote learning side of it, but business principles and numeracy and analytical skills. You become a sounding board for your FD, and you help your FD to become a better FD. And then in a group situation, your training gives a different lens. Your training coupled with a slightly different non-traditional finance role gives you a different lens on the business. So in a diverse team, I think that continues to add value.
So then from this finance director role, what was the path now to CEO? How did that start to happen?
That next step was very much an opportunity that was grabbed. So I was seconded onto a an ERP project to say, let's go and find some systems. We're in 2002, this business needs to progress, it's growing well, not just Kia, but the whole AMH importer division. We're using green screen systems, we're not interfaced, everything's manual capture. It feels a little bit archaic, and it's going to limit our growth at some point. And my thinking was, I want to be part of this team because I don't want to work in a business in 10 years that's so old-fashioned in that respect. And when that team had done its work, there was now a role to deliver this system. I'm not an IT person. I'm not, I'm not in love with systems for the sake of systems. But I saw a leadership opportunity that no one else was going to take, and so I put my hand up and I said, I'm prepared to give up what's a more glamorous sounding role, financial director for Kia. Everyone knows Kia around the Braai, to become the AMH project executive on our new ERP system, which nobody around the Braai knows about, and say, did you get fired, or what's going on? Because I had a longer term view, and I thought I can add value, and it's going to be good for me as well. It's going to give me some autonomy. It's going to be, it's green fields. I can be creative with it. I can collaborate with people in the wider group, in the Hyundai business, in the Renault business, and so on. There's just so much people engagement opportunity in this thing that I want to go for it. Ray wasn't happy with me, as you can imagine, but I think he saw the long-term thing, and that my view was always, I will come back to Kia. I'd like to come back to Kia at the end of this. So work on the business and then come back to working in the business. And that went on for 5 years.
Wow.
But again, it was massive travel. So that worldview expanded. We were off to Germany. We looked at SAP and other systems. We went as far as New Zealand. We were in the UK, we were in Ireland. We traveled the world. We met some amazing people and we saw some amazing systems. And then I had to do the hard work of actually implementing this.
Okay.
And a lot of commercial negotiation, rowing your own boat. It almost felt like a CEO, but of a cost center, not a profit center.
Okay.
So it was great grounding. And after that, and I think this aspect of my sort of life journey is something I would like to share with the world, and it's not very traditional. At the end of that, and it's something you and I were talking about off camera at the start, you've got to recognize your own sustainability. Running is that for me on a day-to-day basis. Someone else will have a different outlet. But at the end of that 5-year project, I needed to close off that chapter. I needed to reward myself. I needed to reconnect with my family. And
switch off for
we took a sabbatical.
Wow.
4 months.
4 months.
3 months in Europe, Spain, Italy, France, and 1 month traveling South Africa and falling back in love with the country of our birth.
Oh, wow.
And it's probably the 4 most amazing months of my life.
Yes.
And people said, this is not in the script. You don't do this. You don't do this at age 37. This is where you're making your big next executive move.
Yes.
And what are you coming back to? At least I was coming back to a job, so there would be something. But because the trust in the leaders, Manny DeCania and Ray Levine, was that strong, and Harvey Adler, I knew I had a sense of worth, and I knew that my career would be looked after.
Did you have to have this conversation, and how hard was it?
Again, those negotiation skills I referenced earlier, I had to bring those to bear. So I arrived back from a Cape holiday in January and said, guys, can we sit down for a second? I'll finish this thing in September, but then I want to disappear. And at that stage we were talking 6 months. The economics of 6 months didn't really work out, but it would have been too long anyway. And they absolutely bought into it. And I think obviously there's a trust, but there's an understanding of how you energize people. And for me, a balloon check or a success check or any kind of award, none of those was going to be as powerful as I need to reconnect with myself and my family.
Yes.
And if I chase that, if that's the light at the end of this short tunnel, my energy is going to be massive, my focus will be incredible, and the team is going to benefit. They saw that. So it wasn't as hard a sell as you might think.
Well, it just shows that money is not always the thing that
Yes.
is the carrot at the end of that journey.
I think we're learning that more and more with the younger generations as well. It's more pronounced than it is for us.
So true. So let's kind of now come back from your sabbatical, and you're on this path to CEO of Kia.
I think what that business had done very well is in the early years, in the Genesis years, the 98 to 2002, has recruited a whole lot of young talent. So there were some seasoned veterans, names that I've mentioned already, Bill Lynch at the top of the Imperial Empire, and they'd hired a whole lot of 20-somethings who were going to work hard, who were ambitious, who had drive, all of those things. And Ray had done the same thing in his business. And so I never saw his job as a target. I never even saw it as a possibility. I just wanted to continue to grow, and I saw the opportunity to continue to grow in this business. So when I landed, and I've now worked on the business, I've had my sabbatical, where do I work next in the business? It was back at Kia. And the first thing that Ray said was parts. So I thought, well, FD was mildly glamorous. Project executive was, decidedly unglamorous. Parts, I mean, that's that dark
Who knows about that?
corner over there. No one ever talks about parts. We just see the numbers coming through. And, being the salesman that he was and being the trusted mentor that he was, we took a drive through, we met with the team, and I saw where I could add value and how it could add value to me as well. And that's where I landed. And I think, there was this rhythm, this sort of 3 to 5 year rhythm developing, and so I set myself for 5 years. But 2 years and 9 months later, we had a shuffling of the deck, and Ray said, your next step is sales director. And now that's glamorous. And I'd said,
extrovert kind of person that has to interface with customers.
Well, exactly. And that project exec role, you would say, from a business perspective, was very inward. And from somebody outside the organization, it absolutely is. But it's not, because you're dealing with your internal customers, you're dealing with your provider. It's very outward, actually. But this was, as you say, extremely extrovert. And I didn't have trepidation about that. I was much more annoyed that you've interrupted the mission I'm on at Parts. I've built this vision of where we're going with Parts, and now you're going to interrupt this. But I think you've also got to recognize timing. And the timing isn't always scripted. In fact, my life has shown me that it usually isn't scripted. But, you can either dig your heels in and say, leave me where I am, I'm happy, or you can say, you see something. I obviously see that sales director is starting to round my experience in this business. I've been in finance, I've been in after sales, I'm now coming into sales.
It's almost like, finance, ops, now it's sales.
Exactly. It's almost like you're doing a journey ship through the business in preparation. And Ray was not doing this, and I think a lot of organizations sometimes get this wrong. They create an obvious single point of failure successor.
Yes.
And that is not good for that individual, and it's definitely not good for the business. Ray was doing this to his executive team. He was round-tripping a number of people through the business and saying, let's see who percolates to the top. And I think as sales director, it was only a couple of years. What I did learn out of that is that it was so dynamic, probably the one job that I could see doing for 40 years, honestly. The market is so competitive, the variables are so dynamic. What worked yesterday doesn't necessarily work tomorrow. Very creative space, very energized space, very sort of front of mind space, and the impact of doing that successfully on the business, obvious, very profound.
Yeah, well, that's top line stuff.
Yeah, and your sales sets up your after sales. So seeing that circle, it was great learning. It was under incredible mentorship. I worked with Zian van Heerden, and I worked with Ray Levine, Manny DeCania as well. I'd also, by the way, since 2002, for a few years, worked with the Daihatsu and SsangYong brands.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so those were brands that I had some exposure to. I was general manager for 4 dealerships under the Kia stable, part-time. It was, you're coping with your day job, let's add a couple more until you sink.
I think what we're finding here is that, Gary is kind of like Elon Musk with lots of kind of responsibilities while you're busy with your main responsibility.
I like that variety. I like lots of moving parts. So that sales director role then happened, and Mark Lamberti had come into the group, and I think he was very strong in executive succession. And so through that, Ray was coming to retirement. there was this evaluation process, and then I was MD designate, and there was a year handover. And I remember this was so empowering. After 9 months, Ray was going to be the commercial executive at Motors head office. Imperial was also starting to unbundle Motors as a motor division. Imperial was going to be concentrate on being a logistics business, and Ray was going to shore up the new head office as commercial executive. 9 months into that home, and so he had 2 offices, and 9 months into that handover year, he phoned me and he said, "I'm not coming back. You've got this."
Oh goodness.
Yeah, it was so empowering, and that was it. And you know, I suppose the wonderful thing is that.
How old was he at this point?
Ray, just over 60.
Okay, so did he want to just kind of go on another path?
Yeah, he was heading for retirement.
Yes.
You know, so that was going to be his last role as, you know, almost a curator role in the group to help this new young group find its way, assisting Osman and Ockett.
And totally left field for you.
Totally. And like I said, it wasn't a destination I'd actively pursued. What I was pursuing was continuous development. I'm hungry to learn. I'm curious. I want to understand this thing better. I want to play with this toy. Okay, now I know how that toy works. What's the next toy? And so parts was a toy, and sales was a toy, and finance was a toy, and IT was a toy. And so it's always, you know, you need to be amused. You need to be engaged. And if you do, if you can create that for yourself, the energy is natural. You know, it just happens. And I think it also lights the way for other people to see that.
You've given me a different spin on something that one of my friends says quite often. He's saying I couldn't claim it, but never sell your toys, because he who dies with the most toys wins. You've given me a very different perspective on the toys now.
Right.
So now you kind of like almost thrust into this role of MD.
Yes.
How did you initially find your feet? Like, what was going through your head at that point? As now you've got to be a leader of the business, and you said something right in the beginning, which was you've got to create your own diary.
So that is initially the most daunting thing. I think, you know, that handover year helped, but suddenly you're not being pushed and pulled in directions. You have to push and pull others. And, you know, running a functional area does give you some level of that. But at the top, when you don't have a day-to-day boss, of course, everyone has a boss. Even the boss has a boss.
Yes.
The shareholders, they have non-executives, they have all of that. And we all have a boss at home. But it was not to rush it. So it was give yourself permission to settle in. Give yourself permission to let the vision you thought you had from a different perspective, let that crystallize and understand what role you need to play here. I was never in love with the role being a maintenance role, or, you know, it's always going to be about how do I bring people with me? How do I build a team? How do I create meaning for them? How do we bring their best thing forward? It was never about I'm the Elon Musk, I'm the visionary, and thou shalt obey. I think that, you know, for us ordinary people, that creates way too much pressure,
yes.
and we will fail.
Yes.
For us ordinary people, this is more about the collective. Surround yourself with good people, give them the space to be creative, have real discussions around where this thing could go, understand what your mission is as a team, and then your role is to lead that team to that conclusion. And I would say that my big early learning was the mission is actually clear, but the timing is not right.
It's not right.
So the first thing is take the business as is, health check all the areas, settle the team through the transition. Remember, I was replacing a founder CEO who'd been there for 18 years. His authority, his credibility was unquestioned. He was the founder.
Yes.
And for most of the team, I wasn't a stranger, but I'm now in a new role. So they're watching. Is this culture going to shift? Will it become toxic? How will you cope? How will this affect us? Are we part of your future? All of that anxiety, even if you're part of the team, is there. Is there. And so to me, it was about starting softly and then starting to build a story and being that storyteller. I think CEOs have to be storytellers. Guys, this is my story. Do you like it? Will you come with me? If they won't come with you, then maybe some of them need to move on.
Yes.
If they will come, if they don't want to come with you, maybe they can reshape the story with you, because maybe there's an element of the story that needs tweaking.
Yes.
You've got to be humble with that. And I think we did co-create. So there was the headlines I'd written in my head, the detail the team wrote together.
They coloured it in.
They certainly coloured it in. And then it was about timing. And what we wanted to do was to say the best way for Kia to exploit its potential in the world is to vertically integrate, is to own its dealerships, or the bulk of its dealerships. The way we go to market must be curated under our leadership. We're not retail specialists, but we will build that team, and we have built that team. And then, on the one side, your vision has the best chance of realizing, but also if it fails, you've got nowhere to hide.
True.
Your vision was wrong or your execution was poor. So you've got to be, it's one of our 5 values, you've got to be brave. You've got to be brave. And that bravery, I think, was tempered with some caution up front, is to say, let's just find our feet, let's understand.
I suppose as a leader, you've got to be open, I guess, and it sounds to me like this is kind of part of your own internal philosophy, is you've got to be open to be wrong and called out by your team.
Yeah.
You know, even if CEOs that think that they know everything don't. And it sounds to me like you painted the lines of the picture, the team coloured it in, and then you all went there together.
Somebody taught me a technique a long time ago, which is when you have a meeting, put the people in the room who are necessary to get to the conclusion. So don't make it a social group.
Cook spoil the broth type thing.
Exactly. But then engage the quietest person first.
Ah.
If you start with the loudest person, or the person who tends to be more domineering, the second loudest now is under pressure from what's already been put into the room. And then the third, so you get a diminishing return all the way through. You'll always find, if you go that way, that the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th person have almost nothing to say. You go the other way, you never lose what that loudest person is going to say. They're going to say it anyway. The softest person now is speaking into a vacuum.
Yeah.
And they're feeling valued. Now I understand why I'm in the room. And you acknowledge their contribution, you empower the next person, and up and up. It's such a simple step. And I see it not happen more often.
It's true. He who shouts the loudest gets the attention. That's what happens most of the time.
Yeah.
Us as leaders need to control that meeting in that way, because that's our job. Not control in a negative way, but more control the cadence and who gets to voice their opinion, so that you get value out of everybody.
Absolutely.
Even the loudest guy.
Yes. The team must feel invested.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're in Kia and you start to face challenges. I want to bring up one of the biggest challenges that you might not be facing in Kia, maybe Kia to a certain degree, but also in the market, because you're also one of the executives on the Automotive Business Council.
Yes.
And so you wear a few hats. One of these hats is these illegal imports. And you seem to have taken this kind of raging bull by the horns. Tell us a little bit about what illegal imports are. How do they exist, and how do they come about, and have we missed something in our legislation, in our regulation? What's wrong with the system? How is it broken?
Okay. So illegal imports, firstly, imports of second-hand cars, and we are talking second-hand and sometimes nearly new cars, it's a policy decision. So in many countries, and certainly in many countries in Africa, the policy decision, the regulation says import of second-hand cars is legal. And that's often solving for affordability. In other countries, it's not legal, but it's not enforced. So de facto, it just happens. It's just natural. If you're looking to industrialize, and we are industrialized in the motor industry, we have auto manufacturing, you cannot have that coexist with rampant used car imports, because it just undercuts your domestic market. So any factory has to be able to sell locally and regionally, as well as export around the world. You'd never build a factory in a country where you can't sell a single car, right? Yes. Why would you do that?
No, you need local demand.
You need local demand. So it's obvious to us as industry leaders that if you were to allow this, either through policy or through lack of enforcement, you're going to undermine your strategic goals as an industry. You're going to undermine the strength of your industry. Our view is, so in South Africa, it is illegal. The import and consumption of second-hand cars, which obviously have to be right-hand drive, and therefore largely are from Japan and other right-hand drive countries, the import and consumption is illegal. There are no loopholes. So the loopholes might be, and it's 0.01% heritage vehicles. I am an immigrant. I've immigrated from the UK and I want to bring my car with me. There's a process you need to go through, lots of red tape, and then that car gets naturalized in South Africa.
Yes.
By and large, it's not allowed. What we do have is we have ports that are the only seaport entries for a lot of our neighboring countries.
Because they're landlocked.
They're landlocked, okay. Exactly. So under Geneva Convention, we're obliged to transit those cars, to process them through our port, and then they must ship off to Zimbabwe or wherever they're officially destined for. So the policy's there. The enforcement is where it's lacking. And there are a number of areas where if you only undermine it slightly, when you add all of these things up together, you've almost got a free-for-all. I mean, I had the brigadier from the police say in our SA Auto Week last week, I mean, I put the words in his mouth, but he echoed them. The criminal element has a blank check on illegal imports in South Africa. They're operating with impunity. I think we've got a massive job to do, as we have on electric vehicles that we spoke about yesterday, to educate the consumer. The consumer says, it's almost like buying my parallel import dishwasher. I can get it cheaper, they pay their duties, it's not illegal, I'm going to buy it there. Maybe the warranty is different or it's slightly out of spec. But I'm getting it for 40% of the price or 70%. I'm going for it. This is not the case here. If these cars are being used in South Africa, they didn't pay duties. So it's domestic consumption without tax. They are out of spec and therefore probably unsafe.
And probably don't fit the standards of the European
emissions, spare parts. It's out of spec, so can I get that bumper? So
people don't really realize that cars, a Toyota Corolla in another country isn't exactly the same as a Toyota Corolla here, for instance.
No, very much not the case. And you will learn that through the ownership experience. But the starting point is that these things cannot coexist. Unchecked, this will kill the SA Auto, kill manufacturing.
But I was staggered to know the numbers the other day.
Yeah.
Where it's not single-digit percentages that are driving around on our roads.
The way I express it, I think the most clearly that everyone can understand. If we are selling 30,000 passenger cars a month as an industry, we are selling 30,000 illegal imports per annum. So it's a 13th month of sales. I call it the 13th check. If we kill this, we give the industry a 13th check. But this is, that's not going to land well with the consumer to say, well, you're making enough money anyway, we don't care about your 13th check. I think what we're saying to consumers is, you are breaking the law. And the real danger to you is that if enforcement does tie up correctly, that car will be impounded and ultimately crushed. Whatever you paid will be lost.
Do we know, don't these cars ultimately, through whatever mechanisms, become part of our systems anyway, in terms of the NATO system?
So that's one of the loopholes, is that introduction of a car can happen through a manufacturer or an importer or a builder, or it can happen through a paper process at a licensing center. So how do you control that?
Exactly.
You need to do a few things. You need to be checking that every car that came into the country as an import leaves the country. So you need a check and balance. That's between customs and the border police and Transnet, the manifest of when the car arrives. Digitally, those things that loop needs to be closed. You need to cut out on the fraud at licensing. So you need to digitize that process. You need to have oversight. You need AI, big data, all of that. You need people, you need customs and police at a roadblock. One, to have the data. Two, to have absolute clarity on the procedure of impounding, crushing, all of that kind of thing. And then you need to deliver on it. And somebody needs to be accountable.
Are these cars flagged in the NATO system that the police have access to? So let's say a roadblock happens, and I'm driving an illegal import.
Yes.
And the policemen, which, I mean, all they do is check your license and your license disc. They don't
Yes.
really, and fines.
Yes.
I got stopped for fines the other day. I never had any, fortunately.
And roadworthy, perhaps.
And
All
roadworthy.
tyres, that kind of thing. Yeah.
But surely they've got access to the NATO system and access to the car's record.
Yes. So many of these, if not most of these cars, will have a foreign plate on them. They'll have a Lesotho plate or a Botswana plate
get
or a
you.
Zimbabwe plate. This is one of the weaknesses, is that either those equivalent notices are not digitized, or we don't, as a country, have sovereign access into them at that moment. So you may be able to query it, and 2 weeks later you get a result. Oh no, this is a fake plate.
Okay.
But
So we can't impound that car at the roadblock because of these hurdles.
yes, so those, if that car, let's say that car was legitimately Zimbabwean, it came into Durban, it left, crossed our border, it was a resident Zimbabwean car, and came in as a visitor, that's allowed for 12 months.
Okay.
So that foreigner may drive that car for 12 months before they have to repatriate it. And that's practical. You can understand the practicalities of it. There's cross-border movement all the time.
Yes.
We don't have the date stamp. So on inspection, how long has this car been here? So you're clearly foreign, or you're representing as foreign. I can't vouch that you could be, you've never been to Zimbabwe. You've got a Zimbabwe plate. I can't vouch that it's genuinely Zimbabwean. Even if I did, do I know how long it's been in the country?
Yes.
You may not be flouting those rules. So there's a lot of little elements that have, to some extent, fallen away, that have created these weaknesses. And I think the last element is that there's been some legal challenges around the impounding. South Africans saying it's my right to own property, and you're alienating that right. Probably misguided, but have we done enough through the various government departments to either say we need to challenge that in court, or we need to rewrite the legislation? I think both of those things are lagging.
And are we getting there? Just as a final point, I mean, is this going down the right road, or are you, as part of this kind of drive, hitting roadblocks all the time?
Far too slowly, and I think the discussion needs to be elevated to top level. So this is cabinet level. This, the police said to me, this should be seen as a priority crime. This should be seen in the same light as money laundering, and I believe there is a money laundering
Economic
aspect
crimes
to it.
it's an economic crime, that's what it is.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
It's organized crime as well. It's not disorganized, it's very organized. So there's a lot of work to be done, and there's no silver bullet, there's no single player, there's no single one of those interventions that will arrest it, but it needs to be stopped in its tracks. And even if the cars that are currently with us live out their natural lives, at least we've stopped it growing and stopped it displacing what should be happening in our market naturally.
So let's talk a little bit about the Kia Rio Club.
Yes.
Because before we sat down here, you said to me there's a Kia Rio Club. I'm not going to claim to have known that, but the Kia Rio is not going to be available anymore.
Yes.
What is the reason for that when it's so popular?
You're absolutely right. It's probably our most naturally popular model. In other words, the cars that we get, we virtually don't have to do any marketing. They sell themselves. It's a run rate. The dealers bank them every month. My daughter, who's getting a learner's license in June, she wants a Kia Rio. That's the car that she wants. So it's still a very, very popular car. The Rio Owners Club exists because of that passion. It's not something that we curated as an OEM. Owners got together, they organized themselves, and they have charity drives and weekend getaways and long drives.
What is it about the car?
It's just it's one of those things that the community's just fallen in love with. I think the previous generation was one of the first small cars to have those big alloys. Remember the Rio Tech with the 17-inch alloys. It's hard to fall in love with something that's ugly, right? So I think Rio has always, certainly in the last 2-3 generations, been a pretty car. People see it as a mini BMW. It's affordable. It's incredibly well built. It's good looking. It never breaks down. Economical to repair. There's many reasons why you would fall in love with it. Rio has become a phenomenon in and of itself. So it was certainly not a decision as Kia South Africa that demand is flagging, and so let's just continue this. What we do have is in our range, we don't have any price gaps in our range. So you've got Picanto, you've got Pegasus, you've got Rio, Sonnet, and then the range carries on. So even without Rio, there is a Kia at every price point, but yet Rio continues to be relevant. What really happened is that the factory line that builds Rio right-hand drive, it's also built in Mexico for left-hand drive markets, where it's more popular as a sedan actually in the US and in South America. For us, it's much more about the hatch. In fact, Pegasus has replaced the Rio sedan anywhere, so it's really Rio hatch. That line, somebody crunched some numbers, some accountant, I guess, crunched some numbers and realized that it's the opportunity cost of a model that they could be building more of required Rio to be displaced, or Rio right-hand drive to be displaced. And so we got that news, the Australians got that news, other right-hand drive markets got that news.
Is there Rio in the UK?
No, it's not. Rio is not in the UK. Okay. So the Rio, what we would call the Rio Cross, the Stonic, is sold in the UK, and that's off that same line.
Oh, wow.
That's very popular, I guess highly profitable, and so that's one of those investment decisions that were made. And I think the perspective is not that South Africa doesn't matter. The perspective is that we are a small market in world terms. Nobody of any brand is going to build a model for
just
our market alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So sorry, Kia Rio Club. But they might just gain value now, second-hand.
We're already seeing that,
yes.
and are still popular as a new model, and we will sell them at least for the rest of this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yesterday we were at NAMSA's, the Automotive Business Council's first of, I think, 3 sessions.
That's right.
And this one was around the transition to electric vehicles or new energy vehicles.
Yeah.
Let me first ask what your takeout was there. And then my second question is going to be, we've been speaking a lot about EVs as a industry, as a petrol heads, or however you want to refer to that in the future, but and it's been going on now, probably started just before the pandemic in a meaningful way. The green paper, which hasn't been turned into a white paper, and we've been talking and talking and talking. And I must just add, yesterday for me was one of the most meaningful discussions that I've been part of, and so I got a positive benefit out of those discussions. But what was your take on yesterday, and do you think it's serious and it's now turning into action, or is it just more talk?
Look, I think what you heard yesterday, which wouldn't have been news to you, is that this is a burning platform. So as much as the opportunity to transition exists, and it was laid out. We have expertise on the ground, we have sunk investment, we have markets that we supply. All of that's there. And as a country, we are going through this just transition. All of that's in place. What we don't have is, and we have a framework for the auto industry. So it's not like we're starting with a blank sheet of paper. What there is a need to tweak or accommodate NEVs and the transition through the existing framework, the APDP. And you would think, because we don't have a standing start, we have a rolling start, you'd think that the policy would formulate, clarity would be created, the roadmap would become crystal clear fairly quickly. That hasn't happened. I suppose we could forgive some element of that being, when this conversation started, COVID hit. We were dealing with bigger problems. The biggest problem in this country is the threat of deindustrialization, job losses, economic stagnation.
This raises that threat.
Here
right?
is a palpable example of how you can turn something away from damage control to growth and a thriving industry. And I think the scary part is that as much as conversations with government are happening, and they are happening, as Andrew Kirby alluded, as Michael Mabasa alluded, we've met with Minister Godongwana, we've met with Minister Patel on numerous occasions. It's the speed of policy formulation that is most concerning. Alec Erwin, remember Alec Erwin's words yesterday, and that's unfathomable. And in my mind, indefensible. If it's not that complicated. It requires clarity, and it requires government to close the loop. We cannot make multi-billion rand investments as an industry without that clarity. We cannot do this by ourselves. Whatever you do, create the landscape, and business will adapt, for better or worse. But you've got to create the landscape, and that's what hasn't happened.
So what I'm hearing is OEMs are ready, industry's ready, there's consumer demand. Mm-hmm. The only thing left is closing the loop by the government regulation. That seems to be the missing piece of this puzzle.
Turn the green paper into the white paper.
Into the white paper. Get some roadmap on the go.
Yes.
I suppose where the traction has come from is the industry getting behind this. That's what the last 3 or 4 years have been about.
Yeah.
We're all singing from the same hymn sheet now. So let me ask you one question you may or may not have the answer to, because I certainly don't, and you'd be better placed to answer. And if you're not, the government ministers are best placed to answer. And that is, it's one simple step among many.
Yeah.
And that is, why not just lower the import tax? And we're going to talk about the Kia EV6 in a second. But why not just lower the import tax immediately from 25 to 18 on imports of EVs?
Yeah.
Surely the government is not making that much tax revenue on imported EVs right now.
Right.
That they got anything to lose.
So you're spot on. I think sometimes and maybe this is how the administration works and how government frameworks work, is that in business we make micro decisions quickly, and then we assess the impact and we move on. Yes. Right? And we correct. I think what we're stuck in is that element is only an element, and so we don't even deploy the element until the whole master plan is clear. So that could be a quick win, but isn't happening because the mothership needs to come in.
We almost need to launch the rocket and fix it in flight.
I think that's right. And right now, if you are not, most of the EVs being sold are very expensive ones, yes. Right? If you were to launch a subsidy program, and I don't believe duties is the right answer, and I'll share with you in like a 1 minute why not. But if you were to launch whatever subsidy you're going to do to make those cars cheaper, do it now before there's a big park, because if the unintended consequence is you devalue the park, yes. Right?
Yes.
Imagine we made cars 50% cheaper tomorrow. What does that do to all the used cars on the road? The banks won't be happy. The consumers owning cars won't be happy.
There'll be hundreds of dealers going out of business.
Exactly. So I think you've got to create this roadmap, and you can't hit it with a sledgehammer either. But you've got to create stimulus. You have to create stimulus. The duties is not the answer, because the duty ecosystem is what funds manufacturing. But other taxes on the car, we know, right? 45% of the sticker price of a car is taxes. It's going straight to the fiscus. Sell more cars at a lower tax per car. Everybody wins. The fiscus wins. We create more jobs. We put people in more noble mobility. We unlock their access to the economy. All of these things, virtuous things, start to happen.
And it's not like we don't have the demand. We do.
Yes, and it's not a net check you have to write out. I think our modelling has shown, yes, we understand the fiscus is under pressure, debt levels are rising, we've got social problems around health and corruption and Eskom and whatever, bailing out post offices and things like that. Where do I write this next check from? We're saying it's tax neutral.
So let's talk about the Kia EV6. Kindly said I could drive it for a little bit. The Kia EV6, when is it officially coming to South Africa? You've obviously been in the car.
Yes.
What is your assessment? Now, obviously, you're Kia biased. You would be. But if you had to kind of put that bias to one side for 1 second and kind of compare the Kia EV6 to other EVs you've been in.
Yeah.
And there's a reason I'm asking that question, because yesterday we also spoke about AutoTrader's studies that show that consumers are not brand loyal, as much as brand loyal in an EV as what they are with an ICE vehicle.
Yes.
So what does this Kia EV6 bring that could rival that kind of main brand? Because now you don't have this German brand uphill battle to fight with the Kia EV6, and do you feel that that's the case?
So firstly, I think you're absolutely on point. That's been part of the reinvention of Kia, is to say, as we transition into EVs, we don't have to convince the BMW driver as much in the ICE world to cross the bridge.
Yes.
Here it's almost a new lens, a fresh lens, especially that early adopter. They're much more open to looking at something different. So the EV6 has won European Car of the Year 2022, European Car of the Year, German Premium Car of the Year 2022, in the Germans' backyard, right?
Wow.
It's won a Car of the Year award in the US, and this year it won the World Performance Car of the Year as the top line EV6 GT. Why has it done that? I think it's the cohesiveness of the offering, the styling, the comfort, the experience, the technology. It's vehicle to grid. It's up to 350 kilowatts charging that it can receive. Level of autonomy. Obviously at a price point as well. Just the whole package. I think what it's done for EV is saying, this is compelling. So before it might be, I just want EV, or I want ultimate 0 to 100, or it's an element that I'm seeking. I think this is just one of those all-round great packages. That's the opportunity for South Africa, is that brand perception shift is best expressed through product, and electric vehicles is going to, for Kia, accelerate that opportunity for us.
That's exciting to hear. And is the Kia EV6 still that premium segment, or is it getting closer to that kind of?
So the naming convention is the clue, right? So EV6 is not EV1. The EV9 has been previewed and will launch later. That's a very big car. That would probably, overseas we have a big SUV called a Telluride. The EV9 is as big as a Telluride, if not bigger. The EV5 has been previewed, and that's sort of a Sportage-sized full electric car. So there will almost certainly be EV4, 3, 2, 1.
Wow.
And then everything in between. So EV6 positions towards the top end.
Yes.
When we were speaking about quintiles within the price bands, it's quintile 4 or 5,
Yes.
unashamedly.
Yes.
So it's certainly north of R1 million. And believe me, and you'll experience this, it deserves to be there. Just as a piece of engineering, it feels like it is that car. That is not the heart of our brand or our business model. It's a flagship, it's a halo model, it's a statement. Where we really want to be transacting is in the Sportage sort of price range, 600,000, 800,000, where there's volume, where there's a consumer who really wants to spend that money, who sees value. EV5 will do that for us. Nero will do that for us. E-Nero will do that for us. Where we are homologating these cars as they arrive. EV6 is homologated. Nero is being homologated. More product will come. We launch when the business case aligns. This is a little bit about rand dollar. It's a little bit about government policy. It's a little bit around pricing from Korea. You can imagine, and I can confirm, because EV6 has been such a smash, as much as we've come out of the semiconductor crisis, the EVs there's more demand than supply.
Yes.
And so any rational business or brand is going to look to the markets where it has to have EVs, where it has to win, and that's Europe, the domestic Korean market, certain states in the US. That's where it has to win. And so the rest of the world will lag. I mean, the way that we put it at the brand, it's the same road, just a different speed.
Okay, that's interesting. That's fascinating. I can't wait to drive it, to be honest. I absolutely. I haven't driven a fresh EV for a couple of months now. So let's shift gears a little bit.
Yes.
Day in the life of Gary Scott.
I don't like too much uniformity. I don't like it to be that predictable, but I think you have to have some kind of framework. So by default, I'm a morning person. And I live in a house where not everyone is a morning person. So that has its own sort of dynamic.
Does it mean you go to bed earlier?
It does.
Okay.
It does. But I'm also a YouTube fiend, so and I love music. So going to bed early doesn't necessarily mean sleeping early. But I believe in quality of sleep, and I think exercise helps, because if your body is relaxed from exercise and tired and needs to rejuvenate, quality of sleep comes with that. But because I'm the morning person, I'm out on the road early. So 5 o'clock, 5:30, I'm going for a run 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And if I'm not running, what I've taken up in the last 6 months is something like yoga, sort of a stretching routine, a breathing routine, a mindfulness routine, which is great. And also, as we get older, helps prevent injuries. And then it's then it's breakfast as the sun's rising. Check in with the kids. I may be dropping off kids at school. Usually not. Maybe one of the kids, not all of the kids. But checking in around the breakfast table. How's everyone doing? Preparing for the day. Almost certainly, the kids are slow to get out of bed, but I've probably cleared 4 or 5 emails before I even.
Do you do that on your mobile device, or do you do it on a desktop device?
Both.
On both. Okay.
Both. Yeah, but that time of morning probably on the mobile device.
Okay.
And setting other people up for their days as well. And remembering that we're part of a global organization, at least as a brand. Not a big time difference to Dubai, but there's always something to be acting on.
So South Africa works through Dubai?
Works through a regional office in Dubai.
Not directly to Korea?
No.
Okay.
No, thankfully. Otherwise it would be a 24-hour job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's off to the office. So it's not off to the office or a dealership or to our group head office. Typically, those would be my typical destinations. Our dealer business runs, as I said earlier, there's a vertically integrated business. The rest of our network, about 40 dealers, are independent. Dealing with independent franchisees is wonderful. They're entrepreneurs. They have a lens on their community. They have ideas of their own. We co-create, so it's quite a good energy space, and very different to the importer side of the business. So I get to play with both of those, wear both hats. That can be quite dynamic. But generally, probably 3.5 days out of a 5-day week, my office day starts in the office. And it doesn't start at 8 o'clock. I've already probably got an hour and a half's work done by the time I get in, but I'm getting in 8:30 to 9. I'm avoiding traffic. I'm letting people's days in the office start. They can breathe before I come in. And I'd like to come in high energy and just greet everyone on the way in, charge off to my office, and the day starts. I think we can be led by our diaries. We can be led by email. There's a lot of noise on email. We've got to kind of sit back. I like to do that over my first cup of coffee. What do I want to achieve today? What are the top 5 priorities?
So you've got quite a loosely structured kind of. You sit down and you map out. You write it down.
I find writing I've gravitated towards the iPad, so it's now digital writing.
Okay.
But the stroke, the kinetics of just moving your hand and the brain, I think it works. The PA is never far away. She's batting stuff in and out of the diary. She would have arranged this session today, for example. And then it's open door. So if I close the door, I'm in a mindful space. I'm thinking about something deep, complex, long-term.
The team respect that.
And the team, it's like a body language thing. They understand what that means.
Okay.
But by default, 70% of the day, the door is open. Communication gravitates towards me, or we catch it in the passage, or we catch it on a dealer visit. It's fairly organic in that sense. You're getting a lot of feedback, and you're just assessing the whole time. There's always fires to be put out. You can only have so much structure. The fires can be fun. You don't want to be dealing with 50 fires a day. That would be a signal of something else. But most of the time is about the longer term objectives, the levers. What are the big levers we're pulling? And so probably from a people interaction perspective, we have a flat structure. We're not a massive organization at importer level. I can be dealing with the head of distribution. I can be dealing with the tea lady. But mostly it's with my exco. So we have specific one-on-one time, but then we have very natural corridor meetings, 5-minute check-ins, open door, drift in. I do the same. I wander around the office and I drift in, check in, how's your day going? And I think part of that is just about creating a culture where everyone feels approachable, we understand the humanity in each other. When we have tough conversations, we can do it because we actually trust each other and we understand that, I have a vested interest in you as a person. You're not just a transaction or an employee. So I think we have a good vibe, really.
So during the course of your day, is it mostly structured via meetings, mostly face-to-face people time?
So, it's funny, I think we all came out of COVID with this 8-hour day, and we managed to do 16 meetings, and we're so productive. But you lose so much magic. You lose that human touch. And so, what I try to do, and this is sort of my KPI for my PA, is 40% schedule time, 60%, let's call it slack. In that slack, I'm dealing with admin, but I'm also just trying to sit back, helicopter view, what I need to really put some energy and brain time into. Who do I need to co-opt into this? How do we create alignment? What's not working? If I have that 60% time, I feel a lot more effective. It's not always the case, and you'll also go through busy seasons and quiet seasons, and I think we've got to manage that, and we've got to fill the time ourselves. If you fill the time yourself, then you're in charge of that narrative. If you're sitting back, people will fill your diary. As the head of an organization, you're always in demand. Someone's always trying to sell you something, solve a problem you don't have, etc., etc.
Exactly. I try and get this through to the executive team here at AutoTrader as well, and that is what I call, I can't say, I can't remember where I heard the term, but I can't say I came up with it, what I call cerebral time. You need thinking time. You can't just be doing.
Yeah.
And that's that 60% you're talking about. It's just,
absolutely.
You've just got to take a step back, and would you say it's almost like working on the business as opposed to working in the business? Is that 60% of the time?
It's true, and because I also sit on the Motors Exco, a lot of that work is almost built in. So you're almost having to operate at a different level, because now you're dealing with a problem that doesn't just affect your business, it affects the group, and whether that's organizational or strategic or whatever, you're going to spend some time in that space, and you're going to be dealing with some people who live in that space all the time. And so they pull you into that space, which is wonderful. I like both. I like the operations, and I like the more strategic stuff as well.
Knowing you for a while now, you come across and you demonstrate as being a very grounded leader. You want to be part of the people. You know your role as a leader, but you still want to be part of the people.
Yeah.
What are some of the tips or learnings you can give either young leaders or even seasoned leaders that kind of are looking for a fresh way of thinking about leadership?
I think it's going to sound a little bit like a bumper sticker, but the reality is, and you will learn this the hard way or you'll learn this the easy way, is that you cannot be a better version of somebody you admire than they are. You can't. You can only recognize the virtues you see in that person, adapt them try and absorb them into your makeup. But ultimately, the only way people are going to accept being led by you is if they believe the you that you present is the you that you are. So it's
authenticity.
About authenticity. It's as simple as that. If you pretend to be somebody else because there's a stereotype around how an auto leader needs to behave, their mannerisms, their way of work, how they attack things. If you feel that that's the only way, either you will never gravitate or just say, well, that's clearly not for me, I can never be that person, which is tragic, or you'll put a hell of a lot of energy into being somebody you're not, and you will fail. You'll never be great, and it will be energy sapping. And if your job doesn't energize you, that's an absolute red flag. Yeah, you should move on. So I think that's the biggest thing, is understand who you are and be yourself.
Just be authentic.
And then the second thing is, you may have this thing, and I think a lot of younger leaders suffer from it. It's more pronounced in South Africa because, firstly, we've got this generational thing, a lot of young people coming through, and there may be, I've seen it a few times, maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's television, maybe it's American culture, that instant gratification.
I was about to say instant success. Yes.
Exactly. There's no such, that's not authentic, there's no substance behind that. Your 18-year-old entrepreneur is an outlier, right? What we need to be seeing is that people understand what they need to develop in to grow and to add value. What we need to be seeing is that people trust their leader or their mentor to give them honest feedback and to help them along that journey. And we need to understand that we need to check in with ourselves. Is it something that I really want? It's not the be all and end all. For me, this job still is not the be all and end all. It's, this is lovely, what's next? And sideways, down, forwards, upwards, it's not about that. It's about feeling at home. It's that inclusivity. It's I can see who I am.
You said it earlier on. The constant need for growth.
Yes.
That's what really seems to fuel you, is that constant need for growth.
And that's what I was going to say. Is in the old days, perhaps it was, I've arrived, and I've seen this with some of our younger leaders. You arrived. You're now the dealer principal. You are king of the castle. As soon as you have that mindset, you have lost.
You're in trouble. Yeah.
You're in deep trouble, because you have to continuously improve. You have to be learning all the time. You will just become redundant over time if you're not learning. So you've always got to say, somebody knows more than me. I've got lots to learn. It's a responsibility as a leader to continue learning. How do you continue to teach if you don't continue to learn? You can't.
You can't, exactly. It's been a fascinating chat, so I'm going to ask you one last question, and that is, you read a little bit.
A little bit.
You're a serial YouTuber, which kind of resonates with me because I'm also a serial YouTuber. I don't really use Google as much as I use YouTube to find answers to things.
I do both.
Yeah, I suppose everybody does a bit of both, but YouTube is my default because the video seems to describe things a lot better. But then you also battle to find things. I don't know if you find that. But what are you reading at the moment, or what can you recommend young leaders read? So
reading is a spoil for me. Reading is something that I immerse myself on when I'm on holiday. But I'll tell you, and I'll probably just tell you what my favorite books are. Okay, so some people really love autobiographies or non-fiction. Some people only read fiction. I like both. So there's a book called Humanity, which is by far the best book I've ever read. And it's around, it's about civilization and an understanding of mankind from biological sort of evolutionary process through culture and religion to technology, the whole way through the gambit. And the insights into us as a species, as a weird and wonderful species, is just really unbelievable. That's on the non-fiction side. On the business side, I think you can read 100 business books and you may take one sentence out of each. To me, the best business book is the next one you read.
Okay.
All the Malcolm Gladwells and the 10-minute MBAs and the How to Influence People, you should read all of them. Keep reading. You should always have a business book by your bedside and read a chapter at a time.
Maybe just look to take one thing out of it, and that's it.
Exactly, but keep questioning yourself. And if you're not reading, you're not questioning yourself. Your internal dialogue is not fit for purpose. It's not enough. You need to continue reading. On the fiction side, favorite books, Great Gatsby.
I'm not a fiction reader, but that sounds interesting.
What's wonderful, for a non-reader, it's 110, 115 pages. You can read it in an afternoon easily. I've probably read it 10 times. Lord of the Rings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm not a fantasy, I was never like the fantasy kid, but Lord of the Rings was amazing. Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I've never heard of it, but it sounds like
essential reading for every 14-year-old.
Okay. That's been absolutely fascinating, Gary. I thank you again. I've been absolutely humbled by you being here, and continue to do what you're doing. Sounds like your continuous path and seek for growth is just going to see the next 20 years, either at Kia or wherever you are, be successful. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, George.